Well, in New York, 12 jurors are deliberating the fate of Donald Trump and his historic hush money trial. Both sides made their closing arguments yesterday, and after receiving instructions from the judge, the panel of 7 men and 5 women went behind closed doors to decide whether the former U.S. president is guilty of 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. Now, those records are related to a hush money payment made to a porn star in the run-up to the 2016 election. A lot is at stake for Trump, who is the presumptive Republican nominee in the upcoming election. He could end up a convicted criminal and even be sentenced to jail time. He has denied the charges against him. Let's cross again to journalist Pamela Falk in New York, who's been covering the trial for us. So the jury's been deliberating. They deliberated for several hours. You told us that they sent a note to have transcripts reread to them. And now we understand they've been dismissed for the day.
Yes. Yes, they have been dismissed for the day, so it's day one of jury deliberations with no verdict. And that's the bottom line here. Now, what they need tomorrow is when they come in, they would like to read those transcripts that they requested. And they were 3 regarding David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, and 1 about David Cohn's relationship in those conversations in 2015. Now, all of that goes to what the jury has to decide is if there is the burden of proof has been met by the prosecutor that Trump is guilty of one of these crimes, not only falsifying records on the payment to Stormy Daniels, but also with the intent to defraud the government in terms of election financing. And so that's what they have to determine. And by asking these questions, they're asking to look back at a transcript. The jury is not given a transcript of the witnesses. The jury has to ask. They rang the bell. They asked for this. And Judge Merchan said it'd take a while to get all this together. So one would think that in the morning they'll be able to read those transcripts, or at least soon after they begin deliberations again.
I wanted to ask you something about that was said by Trump's attorney, Todd Belt, during his closing argument, Pamela. He told jurors that they should think twice before sending a man to prison. And afterwards, the judge, out of the presence of the jury, told Blanche that that statement was outrageous, highly inappropriate. Why was the judge so upset about that?
The judge was appropriately upset in terms of the law because there are 2 reasons. One is that the jury doesn't decide the sentence, so they are not sending him to jail. So that's one thing that he didn't want that added. Second, he's been very clear to the jury in his instructions that none of this should be based on emotion, on liking Donald Trump, on wanting him to go to jail, on not wanting him to go to jail. It has to be fact-based, and that's what criminal trials are. Now, all of that said, there's a second reason, and that is that by mentioning the possible jail time, he's also influencing the jury in terms of what they can and cannot do. And so for both reasons, adding the emotion and the opinion to their minds, and then also because it's really not in their decision to send him to jail. They can convict him of a felony, which could be 4 years in jail. But everyone seems to think that because it's not violence, because it's the lowest level of felony that he's been accused of, a Class E felony, and because he doesn't have a prior record, that it would be unlikely he would actually go to jail, but it certainly would sully his electoral interests.
Okay, we're going to talk more about that with our next guest, Pamela Falk in New York. Pamela, thanks so much for that update on the trial. For more on this, I'm joined by Todd Belt, director of the Political Management Program at George Washington University's Graduate School of Political Management. Thanks so much for being with us again here on France 24. You know, it's impossible to predict these things. The jury could decide in the coming days, even the coming weeks. There are a number of scenarios. Trump could be acquitted. That would be the most simple thing. He could be convicted. There could be a hung jury, as Pamela explained. Just walk us through the political consequences of each of these scenarios for Trump in the upcoming election, starting with an acquittal. If he walks free, does it have a net zero effect on the upcoming election?
Well, thanks for having me on again. It's great to be with you. I think that the differences are pretty minor, actually, on all three of these. And as Pamela said earlier, the jury is really doing its due diligence in terms of trying to get those transcripts and making sure they're making a very cautious decision. And so this helps whoever is on the other side when the verdict comes down. If there is an acquittal, as you said, then Trump gets to crow about this all being, something that was put together by Democrats against him. And I think that helps to solidify his case that he is being targeted, and that helps him solidify his voters. Remember, we're not just talking about trying to convince people in the middle. What we're really trying to talk about is whether or not either side is able to mobilize their voters, and that's what Trump really needs to worry about. If there is a hung jury, then this goes forward into probably another hearing, and then this gets strung out a bit, and then Trump gets to have his circus again, whether that's during the election time or not. And the reason I call this as a circus is, as you can see on your screen, that Donald Trump loves to be out there because he knows that's where the cameras are. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Biden campaign sent Robert De Niro out there the other day is, they know that that's where the cameras are. And finally, if he is convicted, and like Pamela said, I don't think it's likely that he would serve any jail time. Then you probably have an even stronger rallying behind him. Remember what happened to Bill Clinton with the Monica Lewinsky impeachment. People really rallied behind him. And I think that conversely, that is what would people think. The worse this is for Donald Trump, probably the better it is for him politically.
Just to push back on that a bit, this would mean that for the first time we would have a convicted felon, for the first time in U.S. history, as the nominee of a major party. Doesn't that hurt Trump with a segment of voters, independent voters in particular?
Well, there are so few independent voters left. And it is true that this vote may be very, very close. The last two elections were decided by tens of thousands of votes, 71,000 in 1996, 41,000 in 2020. I'm sorry, 2016 and 2020. So a handful of votes can make a difference, but there are very few people who are really, truly undecided. What's really more important at this point in the campaign is to energize your voters, and it's going to be a very, very long campaign, the longest in history. Get them out there and keep them solidified behind the candidate and keep them energized. And that's the problem Biden's having. Trump has it to some extent with some of those Nikki Haley voters, but that's really more important. They have more resources in terms of getting people out to vote than they do in terms of trying to persuade those very few who are left in the middle.
Well, so there's nothing in the Constitution that would prevent Trump from running for president as a convicted felon, even serving as president. And that's something I think many of our international viewers have trouble understanding. Why does the American system work this way? I mean, you could conceivably have a case where Trump, as a registered voter in the state of Florida, can't vote, but he could serve as president. And that seems very strange to many people, I think even many Americans. Why does it work this way?
Well, it works that way because that's how they put the Constitution together, and the Constitution is extremely difficult to change, and the American people are very loath to do that. But we haven't had this problem before. And with all things Donald Trump, we never thought some president would do the types of things that he has done. And if he is convicted, that won't stop him. We had Eugene V. Debs, a socialist candidate for president, actually ran from jail for president. So you can certainly do that. The only qualifications are to be 35 years of age, naturally born citizen. Oh, and one more, to be from a different state than your vice president. That's really the only qualifications. But as with all things Donald Trump, I think many people are going to think we might need to rewrite some of these rules afterwards.
We're running out of time, but I want to ask you, Democrats appear to be very worried about Joe Biden's chances in November. I saw a tweet from a prominent Democratic voice this week warning that if the election was held today, that Trump would win. So why is Biden struggling so much, given that his opponent is now facing the real possibility of being a convicted criminal?
Yeah, it all comes down to the economy predominantly. That's really what it is. People just, their dollar is not going as far as it used to because of inflation. Even though the rate is going down, prices are still high. And when that happens, you blame the incumbent.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. We appreciate your time. Todd Belt, Director of the Political Management Program at George Washington University's Graduate School of Political Management. So good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on France 24. And that's it for now. Stay tuned.